What is going on, world? What's up, YouTube? It's Zero here. Today I'm bringing you guys a brand new episode of For the Swarm. Welcome everyone to For the Swarm, the best StarCraft podcast here on YouTube. And I'm super excited about our episode here today. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, so let's get into it. As a reminder, guys, of our daily scheduled programming, we have new shows every single day for you here on the YouTube channel. On Mondays, you can expect the Gears cast, which is the Gears of War podcast. Tuesdays is, of course, The Resistance, which is the Watch Dogs podcast. Wednesdays is Zero Dark, which is the Call of Duty podcast. Thursdays is The Last Cast, which is the Last of Us podcast. And then on Fridays is the For the Swarm show, which of course is the StarCraft podcast, which is of course today. On Saturdays is the 8 Below show, and on Sundays is Zero Questions, Zero Answers, which is our Q&A show. So with that, guys, a full lineup of programming and content for you guys to take in on a daily basis. And I want to say thank you so much for all the support we've been getting on these videos, guys. Just don't forget to smash the thumbs up button. It really helps me out a lot. Subscribe if you guys are new, and let's get into the show. So I've talked a lot about StarCraft 3, and that's obvious, guys. You guys can look at the number of videos on the YouTube channel I've made about StarCraft 3, and just the future of games in particular is something that I absolutely love talking about here on the YouTube channel. Well, with that, I want to talk about a specific element to StarCraft 3. The rumblings, the talks are continuing for StarCraft 3, the possibilities that a StarCraft 3 could be made or being made currently in development over at Blizzard. Now, we don't have confirmation of this, but what I want to talk about is StarCraft 3 and the possibility of there being free-to-play elements within this title. So let's talk about that, guys. I believe that StarCraft 3 is being made at this point. If it's not really far into development, they're definitely in the initial concept stage and such. I believe, of course, with the 10-year anniversary of StarCraft 2, we are going to be hearing more and more sooner rather than later about StarCraft 3 and kind of what they're working on. We know that they had two StarCraft games that have been canceled. Those were first-person shooter games, however. The first was called StarCraft Ghost. The other was an Untitled StarCraft first-person shooter game. So obviously Blizzard is thinking StarCraft. They're thinking about it. It's in their mind. StarCraft 3, the RTS side, which I believe StarCraft 3 needs to be a real-time strategy to continue the legacy of StarCraft. I believe that they are absolutely working on it at this point in time. Are they going to have free-to-play elements, though, in StarCraft 3? Could this be a free-to-play game completely, which I believe could be a huge move for Blizzard? Most likely, it will not be a free-to-play game. However, I would absolutely love it, and I think it would make StarCraft bigger than it's ever been before, because it would at least bring people in to at least try the game out. They would at least see what it's all about, similar to what Activision's done with Call of Duty and Warzone in particular, which is, of course, the Battle Royale side of Call of Duty, Modern Warfare. And with that, Warzone is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Battle Royale currently in the world. So Activision and Blizzard may be more open to the idea of, hey, maybe we should have some elements of StarCraft 3 that are free to play. If they were to make it free to play, it would justify them having microtransactions and things of that nature in StarCraft 3, which it justifies it because instead of paying for the game, they're kind of, put into the game that you can help support the developers and things of that nature, which makes it more acceptable because StarCraft 2 really hasn't had a lot of microtransactions. A lot of those microtransactions are like, announcer packs and, things of that nature, either, buying the DLC when it would come out as well, the expansion packs. But I just believe, guys, that StarCraft 3 could do so well if it were to be at least have some elements of it free to play. Whether that is, a couple of different whether it's co-op, whether it's the campaign, whether it's the multiplayer. I believe the heaviest hitter, though, for them would be the multiplayer. If they were to make the multiplayer free to play, that could be huge. Now, one thing that they may decide to try would be making StarCraft 3, you have to pay to play, but then they create a StarCraft first-person shooter that is kind of bundled with it or separately, and that StarCraft first-person shooter is free to play. So it's hard to say what direction they would go in. But StarCraft 3, I believe, needs to be a real-time strategy to continue the legacy and lore that StarCraft 1 and 2 started. And I think that, the RTS genre needs to come back in a major way, where we see that this is still a contender amongst all of the other esports out there, amongst all the other games out there. The RTS genre used to be one of the most popular, and now it's kind of really fallen to the wayside. Not very many RTSs come out on a regular basis. StarCraft is still to this day the most prestigious of all of them. And so I just think, guys, that when I look at the gaming landscape, StarCraft 3 and it having free-to-play elements could do so well for this community. Since StarCraft is such a worldwide game, I just think that it would bring people back who maybe left StarCraft after whatever, after, the match-fixing scandal, or after, all the things that we've been through with StarCraft 2 and its, shelf life. I believe that this would be a great opportunity to bring a lot of people back, have people who have been a part of this community, of course, continue playing StarCraft from a free-to-play perspective, but it would bring a lot of people back who maybe left StarCraft, or people who are brand new to the scene coming over to, play the free-to-play version of StarCraft 3, whatever that might look like, whether from a first-person shooter perspective, from the RTS perspective. Can you imagine, though? Since StarCraft 2, we know that Wings of Liberty, it went free to play, right? So it's free to play at this point in time, which is absolutely amazing. So it's almost like they are kind of teasing it. They're almost kind of testing it out to see, okay, are we getting more people to play the game and such? And they are. Now, the problem with it is that there aren't a lot of ways for StarCraft 2 to continue churning out money from a perspective of having microtransactions and stuff within the game. So StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty, or just StarCraft 2 in general, that now has become free to play, there's not a lot of ways that Blizzard can make a lot of money other than like the war chest, which is, of course, that money, though, goes directly towards the prize pool of, the ESL and such. But I just think that this would be such a huge deal for the community at large, for StarCraft as a whole. This would continue everything that they started over at Blizzard. And I know this, guys. StarCraft is absolutely a labor of love for Blizzard. They would absolutely love to continue this. It really comes down to the community, though, and I think the community at first was very much so against a StarCraft 3. I think now there is a movement being built here for a continuation of this franchise moving forward. And so it's just going to come up to us, guys, or come down to us to continue pushing that we want a StarCraft 3, and then the things that we want, the details of it, free-to-play elements of the game would be absolutely huge for this franchise. But I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you guys think about it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and let's have a real conversation about it. Will we ever get a StarCraft first-person shooter or mobile game in the future with this franchise? I want to present this topic and this question to all of you. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts and opinions on this. And then, like I said, I'm going to pass it on to you guys. And I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section down below so we can have a real conversation about it. So let's get into it. So, guys, there have been, as I stated in our first topic of the day, I talked about how StarCraft, as far as from a first-person shooter perspective, was being made twice, actually, and out of those 2 times they both ended up canceled. The first StarCraft first-person shooter title was titled StarCraft Ghost, and then the second one was an untitled StarCraft first-person shooter, which was more recently, that also got canceled. Both of these, StarCraft Ghost and this untitled StarCraft first-person shooter game, were both canceled for one reason or another, whether it was creative differences, whether it was, just they didn't have enough there for a first-person shooter, which I believe would be absolutely amazing. But nonetheless, they've both been canceled. Here's the thing. I do believe a first-person shooter very well may come at some point or another. And the reason for that is because obviously they worked on not 1, but 2 first-person shooters. It didn't work, but at the end of the day, I think that there's certainly something there. There's certainly an opportunity for them to make a first-person shooter at some point or another, that being Activision Blizzard. Now, what I'll say is that obviously, Activision, more so than Blizzard, but Activision is very well known for Call of Duty, which is the biggest first-person shooter in the world. And so I think there's a real question mark, like that StarCraft, for a first-person shooter StarCraft, could do very well for Blizzard as well as Activision. Now, Blizzard is known for a number of games, right? I mean, obviously, Overwatch is probably one of their, bigger titles over there from more so an esports perspective. but they're probably thinking something similar here with StarCraft, making a first-person shooter that could be the next thing after, Overwatch for Blizzard, and it could be something that is really special. People at least trying it out and such. I know many people who would at least try out a first-person shooter StarCraft game. However, I've stated this as well, I don't want that to replace the StarCraft real-time strategy game, which would be StarCraft 3. I would rather this be something separate. So yes, to answer the question, I do believe we're going to get a first-person shooter because it's certainly something that's been on the minds of those over at Blizzard for quite some time, and most likely in the minds of Activision, who owns them. So I think that they will make it. They just got to get over the hump of whether it's the creative decisions, whether it's, what microtransactions are put in the game, whether it's a free-to-play first-person shooter or not. There's so many question marks here, right? And so I believe that there will be a first-person shooter game. That leads me to the second part, which is a mobile game. And we've heard this many times, guys, by Activision Blizzard, that obviously they're going to be making mobile games. Diablo Immortal is going to be coming out here for, of course, Blizzard. You have Call of Duty Mobile, which is absolutely a juggernaut and a massive mobile experience for people from the Call of Duty franchise. So yes, I do believe that StarCraft is going to get a mobile game. Now, what I've stated in the past as well is that I would love them to have some kind of basic concept. If they decide to make the mobile game for StarCraft like a real-time strategy, I would like them to try to take some things, maybe kind of give their own flavor and twist on it to that of Command & Conquer Rivals, which a lot of people didn't like Command & Conquer Rivals. A lot of people actually just didn't give it a chance, but this was a title, in my opinion, that was it was simple to understand, complex though at the same time to try to obtain victory, and there was just lots of back and forth, and I thought it was a great RTS mobile game, to say the least. Probably my favorite actually up to this point in time. Now, if they did do that, made a real-time strategy, like I said, I would like them to kind of take some things that maybe worked or didn't necessarily work and kind of change those things from Command & Conquer Rivals. Do I think it's happening? Absolutely. I absolutely think StarCraft is going to get a mobile game. Now, when is another question, because I believe the next thing coming out for StarCraft is most likely going to be StarCraft 3. Because the first-person shooter got canceled, I was going to say that the first-person shooter is probably the next thing coming. However, since it was canceled, I believe that the StarCraft 3 real-time strategy game is going to be next. Following that would probably also be an announcement for the mobile game. The first-person shooter would probably come at some point later on. I just think, guys, that it makes sense. Look, I would much rather them make these titles than not make them, because guess what? There's a possibility if they don't make these, there's a possibility we won't get any more StarCraft whatsoever moving forward in the future here. We just met the 10-year anniversary, or celebrated the 10-year anniversary of StarCraft 2, which is absolutely amazing. But what I'm getting at, guys, is the longer time goes, there's going to come a point where, that the fan base of StarCraft, not that it's going to go anywhere, because people are going to love StarCraft no matter what, but what I'm saying is this could take us to the next level once again with StarCraft 3, or even a first-person shooter, or even, a mobile game. Mobile games, guys, are definitely a touchy subject for people. However, I do think it definitely helps build legacy. It builds lore and such, and it gives you more ways than one to connect with the franchise, which is one of the most important things to me when you consider building communities, building fan base and such for the long term. Call of Duty Mobile, guys, I mean, it's a great experience overall. I'm not very good at it, but I enjoy what they're trying to do with Call of Duty Mobile. They're continuing to service it, continuing to update it. I'm assuming that they're going to continue that for the future. A StarCraft Mobile could be something very similar, something that could really just kind of continue building what they started with the original couple of StarCraft games. This is kind of, these are spin-offs, right? Mobile game, first-person shooter, continue StarCraft, the real-time strategy side of things into the, to StarCraft 3. I just think it makes sense. It just does. Because do you want StarCraft to go the way of, like, Heroes of the Storm? I don't think you do. You don't want that to just completely, us fall off totally in its totality. Sure, you got to be smart about it, but at the same time, I just think that I would much rather have continuations and take the leap of faith, take that risk on these games, rather than see nothing at all and just get extremely complacent, which I believe that we've been pretty complacent with StarCraft 2 at this point in time. Don't get me wrong, Blizzard's done a great job up to this point with StarCraft 2 in servicing the game, creating new map pools, trying to have balancing and changes and things of that nature. But I think a StarCraft 3, a StarCraft real-time, or a first-person shooter, or a mobile game could certainly continue elevating everything. I don't want them just to announce a first-person shooter. I don't want them just to announce a mobile game. I would rather they announce the mobile game with StarCraft 3 as the real-time strategy, or the first-person shooter with the, with StarCraft 3 as the RTS, because that's what it started as, and that's what it needs to continue as, in my opinion. Sure, you can have spin-offs, you can have other ways in which we can connect with the franchise, but stick with what you know. That's the RTS space. But with that, guys, what do you think? Do you think we're going to get a first-person shooter for StarCraft? Do you think we're going to get a mobile game for StarCraft? Let me know in the comment section down below, and let's have a real conversation about it. StarCraft 2 Esports is a very special title and very close to my heart, guys. Massive fan of the StarCraft esports scene. I believe it's the tennis of esports. It takes so much, guys, just to be at the top of your game for a long period and stretch of time. And I look at two guys in particular. One who's been there for a very long time. The other, not as long, but while he's been in the scene, has been a dominant force to be reckoned with. That being Cyril and Dark. And so, guys, I want to talk about, in this segment of the show, is there anyone out there, anyone who can dethrone Cyril or Dark moving forward here into the future? So let's talk about that. So right now, guys, we can say that Cyril is in his prime. Dark has been playing at a very high level for a long time, but I would say that he is probably going to at some point or other slow down just because, of his age and things of that nature. Cyril's got a little bit longer of a shelf life, in my opinion, but don't mistake, the age for some sort of weakness with Dark. I mean, this is a guy people did not believe was going to win a world championship. And he won BlizzCon, guys, in dominant fashion, and it's not even close. Now, we could argue all day that, if Cyril, the ifs of Cyril beating Raynor to advance, Cyril would have won it all once again. I completely disagree with that notion. I've had people ask me if Cyril would have won, do I think that he would have beaten Dark after advancing against Raynor? And I do not believe so at all. Dark was on a mission to prove that he was still one of the best players in the world, and he absolutely is at this point in time. Now, sure, BlizzCon was run a little bit differently, but it just shows the tenacity and the, just mentally what Dark was able to do in that tournament. Now, that leads us to now. Can anyone dethrone these guys? Sure. At the end of the day, guys, there are people who absolutely can dethrone these players, these two in particular. Now, Cyril has kind of had a tough time at times against a guy like Raynor. And Dark has had trouble with certain players, certain play styles and such. But when it's all on the line, Dark, generally speaking, shows up. He doesn't always make it all the way to the finish line, but he certainly did last year. And so he's the world champion. And he is the best in the world, in my opinion, right here, right now, until proven otherwise, because he just won, of course, BlizzCon. And that was at that point. Now, can somebody, who else would potentially dethrone these guys? I mean, right off the top of my head, I would certainly say Raynor is the guy. Now, obviously, he did not prove that he was the guy against Dark in that grand finals, but he's proven that he can beat the best in the world. He's been able to beat, Cyril on a number of occasions. Dark is this guy, though, who I just don't know if Raynor is quite there yet, that he can make that jump to win in the biggest moments of StarCraft 2. And look, he's been able to beat some incredible players. He's right up there. But I do think it comes down to Cyril and Dark once again. And that was the matchup I wanted to see. This was the battle for who is going to... This was, I mean, Cyril is right at this point in time considered one of the greatest ever. But Dark had something to say about it last year and last BlizzCon. He had something to say about it. He essentially said that, I'm still one of the best in the world, and I want to be put on that pedestal against all these other guys. Now, we look at the best players ever, guys. We look at Life, who I believe was the greatest ever to play. However, he, was caught up in the match-fixing scandal, and when you talk about cheating, guys, I cannot give you that label of greatest ever because it's kind of, there's a kind of when you look at these players and you look at what they've done, and sure, they might have had all these different accomplishments, but there is certainly a stain on that resume for life and what he could have done had he not been involved in the match-fixing scandal. And so I can't give Life the greatest ever. Sure, I can say he's one of the best ever. I believe he would have been the greatest of all time had he not done the match-fixing scandal, and had he just stayed the course, continued playing, I believe that he would have easily been the greatest ever. You have SOS, who's a great player. You have Cyril now, who is an absolute force to be reckoned with and is certainly challenging a guy like Life. And at this point in time, Cyril hasn't been caught up with anything that would tarnish his legacy necessarily. But you got Dark now. And I believe now you've got three guys who are, you could bring SOS into it. You could also, of course, say Life. But you've got pretty much Cyril, Dark, Life, and SOS all vying for the greatest ever. Now, two of these players are done. The other two are still playing at this point. And so the question remains is, are we seeing two of the greatest ever? And I think one of the biggest matchups I want to see at the World Championships, I want to see Cyril and Dark. The battle for the greatest of all time. Because Dark, guys, I mean, he's been kind of quiet over the years. There's been times where people are like, yeah, he doesn't have it anymore. He's not that guy. But then he proves at BlizzCon that he was that guy. He proved his mental toughness against everyone else. And his just will to win at the end of the day. So, I want to see, guys, Cyril and Dark go head-to-head, and it's the battle for the greatest ever, in my opinion. Because both these guys, Dark has a resume, an incredible resume. Cyril has one that is so challenging to that amazing resume. Cyril, the narrative around him is certainly better than Dark's. But Dark is like this guy who has been in the scene for so long, and he's getting better as he's aging almost. And it's unbelievable at the level he's playing StarCraft 2 at. So, can someone dethrone them? I will say absolutely, because anybody can win. These are the best in the world for a reason. I would not bet against Cyril, and I would not bet against Dark. And if they met each other, I believe it would be the battle of the greatest of all time, to see who is the greatest ever. And that's my opinion, guys. And I'd love to hear yours in the comment section down below. Sure, there's guys who could certainly throw a monkey wrench in there. Maru or Raynor. Even guys like Classic, Special. I mean, all these guys can certainly contend for a championship. And that's what it comes down to, guys, is world championships. How many of the big one have you won? And how many times did you make it to that final, to the grand finals? How many times have you won the GSL? Or how many times did you win all of these other tournaments? The big one is the big one, though. It's the Super Bowl of StarCraft, without being BlizzCon, obviously. It's the NBA Finals. How many times have you done it? And that's winning at the highest level of competition in StarCraft 2, in my personal opinion, in the hardest esport in the world. But let me know, guys, who can dethrone Cyril or Dark? Let me know in the comment section down below. And for more StarCraft 2 esports content and videos, stay here with Zero TV. What real-time strategy game out there, or games out there, could challenge StarCraft at some point or another in the future? And I think there's a number of games that definitely could challenge StarCraft for the king of the RTS genre. I want to talk about it. I want to get your guys' opinions on it. There's a lot of RTSs out there, guys. However, they've slowed down with, popularity. They've slowed down with them being developed at this point in time. We know Age of Empires has been one of those games that's been relatively consistent. We know Warhammer has been consistent, and Total War, just a number of these titles have been relatively consistent. Now, what I will say is this. When we look at the real-time strategy genre at this point in time, you could even put in there games like League of Legends or Dota, simply because there's so much strategy that goes on within those games as well. Even though it's a massive, those are both massive multiplayer online games, but if there was a real-time strategy, true real-time strategy that could dethrone StarCraft or StarCraft 2, in my opinion, is StarCraft 3. StarCraft 3 could dethrone it. Now, will I say, like, Warhammer and some of these other games? Absolutely. I mean, there is certainly a possibility that some of these over time could, but we've seen a lot of, entries of some of these games, like Age of Empires, Warhammer, and, the list goes on and on. But have any of them dethroned StarCraft at this point in time as the king of the real-time strategy genre? Absolutely not. I don't think there's any debate, guys, by anyone or any stretch of the imagination. StarCraft is on top. I mean, you could even put Warcraft in there, okay? But they are not StarCraft. They are not competing at this point against StarCraft. StarCraft has been on another level for a long time here. I mean, when StarCraft 2 came out, it was one of the pioneers of esports, guys, in my opinion. It was one of those titles that has one of the strongest fan bases in the entire world. It has some of the greatest narratives in the world. And I believe that there are certainly games out there that could challenge, StarCraft, but the main one that's going to challenge what StarCraft has done is a continuation of StarCraft, and that being StarCraft 3. The updated graphics from 10 years after, the beginning of StarCraft 2, from a graphical perspective, from a perspective that they could go into team-based, team versus team instead of 1 versus 1 for the esports scene, could make it absolutely huge. StarCraft 3 could technically compete against games like, League of Legends and Dota, I believe, if it went to a team versus team kind of, mentality and mechanic within the game and gameplay-wise. There's so much potential here for StarCraft 3 to be the next thing, to kind of re-immerse themselves as, proving once again that it's the king of the real-time strategy genre. It's the real-time strategy game of our time, and it's not even close. And it could also start really competing against games like League of Legends and Dota. StarCraft 3 is what could challenge StarCraft up to this point when it comes to the RTS genre. I don't see any of these games, guys, that have been out now for a long time. Like, we're talking, we're talking about Age of Empires, Warhammer. I mean, even League of Legends and Dota, like, kind of put those to the side. But obviously, because those are two of, like, the biggest games in the world, and there's a lot of strategy that goes on there. But being a massive multiplayer online game, we're just going to put them to the side here. The one thing that can dethrone StarCraft is StarCraft itself, in my opinion, StarCraft 3. I truly believe that, guys. Truly believe that. There's so much possibility here when we talk about StarCraft 3, and I've talked ad nauseum about StarCraft 3 and why this game should come out, but it's the one game that could compete against the other two StarCraft games. We know that StarCraft 1 was more popular than StarCraft 2. I like StarCraft 2 more because of the graphics and all of those things, and obviously the mechanics and such, but StarCraft 3 could take it to another level. From a graphical standpoint, adding a new race or races, having a campaign that either continues the main storyline or goes, to another galaxy or whatever it might be. That's another way that they could really continue it. Co-op as well, having team versus team in the esports scene. I just believe, guys, we're seeing like the team leagues now with StarCraft 2, and man, I absolutely love it. I want to see this move into StarCraft 3 where there's an emphasis of this, as well as keep the 1v1. Obviously keep 1v1, and it's unlike anything we've ever played, out of the RTS genre. 1 versus 1, guys, it's like the tennis of esports right now, and I don't think it should go anywhere, but team versus team, guys, I mean, would put StarCraft on another level, in my opinion. It would continue to transcend the RTS genre moving forward. And that's something, guys, that makes me incredibly excited about the future of StarCraft, because StarCraft, I want to see this franchise continue in some capacity or another. I mean, I'd love to see a first-person shooter, as I stated earlier. I would love to see a mobile game, but I want to see a continuation truly of the RTS, that is StarCraft. I mean, that's what this is a real-time strategy that has transcended the space. Nothing's competing against StarCraft, guys, unless you have something very, very special and unique that comes out at some point. And at that point, we would probably see, the numbers on Twitch, or we would see certain aspects of it that this could be the next big RTS. outside, of course, of League of Legends and Dota. We'll not take anything away from those two absolute juggernauts in the space, guys. But StarCraft is on a different pedestal. It's on another playing field, in my opinion. And the one thing that could top it is StarCraft 3. Let me know, though, what games you think could challenge StarCraft as the king of the RTS genre? Let me know in the comment section down below. And for more StarCraft 3 content and videos, stay here with Zero TV. And with that being said, everyone, I hope you guys did enjoy this episode of For the Swarm. And if you guys did, leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, stay positive, and as always, I'll talk to you guys all in the next one. Peace.